All right. Okay, so we're going to start something new. We're going to start with some talk on Pesach, because there's a whole lot in the Likutei Torah that discusses the ideas of matzah and the mitzvot of Pesach. And so we're going to get into that today, especially according to what the Mishnah and the Talmud discuss, that one is supposed to start studying for the laws of Pesach 30 days before. And so we're late, a couple days late. Anyway, okay, so so the Alter Rebbe begins with, to understand what it says in the Haggadah. This matzah that we eat was for what reason? Al Shomma. Because of, why do we eat the matzah? What do we say in Haggadah? Why do we eat matzah? Anybody?
No leavening, I don't know.
In the Haggadah, the reason it says that we eat matzah is because our forefathers did not have enough time for it to rise.
That's right.
They threw it on their backs and they didn't have enough time for it to rise, right?
That's right. Okay.
So the mashma ha ilu loy garshu. From there it seems that if they didn't run off, if they weren't chased out, v'hispek la'achmitz, and they had enough time to let it rise, hayoichem chametz, they would have eaten the chametz. Then they would have had no problem. They would have, then we wouldn't have matzah, right? That's the way it seems. Had they not been chased out, had they had enough time, then we would be eating chametz. So the Alter Rebbe asked a simple question: they were already commanded on the 10th day of that month. On the 10th day, right? God came to Moses and said that they should all take the Paschal lamb, they should all take a sheep and tie it to their bed. And they were instructed to what? They were instructed to eat the Paschal lamb together with matzah and maror. So in other words, there was already a commandment that on the night, they knew that in 4 days they're going to be leaving Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And they were told that then they're going to take a Paschal lamb, they're going to eat it together with matzah and maror. So then there was already a commandment that they have to eat matzah.
But here they can have the milk of the lamb and make some cheese, and they save the lamb and they can have food the whole way.
Okay. But what does that have to do with the matzah?
Nothing.
The question is, why do we say
But
that?
they don't need the milk of the lamb. They can have the food the whole way.
But they were commanded that they have to eat the Paschal lamb and they have to eat it with matzah and maror. So in other words, we see that they were already commanded to have matzah. So why do we say
What's the myrrh?
the maror, the bitter herbs?
Okay.
So, but
Now
either
I
way,
understand. Bitter herbs.
they were
Okay.
already commanded to eat matzah.
Okay.
Not only that, the gamladeris, and they were even commanded already. They were even commanded already that they have to, that for generations later, for 7 days, they have to eat matzah. And why does it say in the verse that they should eat matzah? It says, for remembering going out of Egypt.
Mhm.
And now there's a second question. So the first question that he wants to understand is, why do we say in the Haggadah, why do we say that? Why do we eat the matzah? We eat the matzah because they were chased out and they didn't have time for it to rise. What do you mean? Even if they had time for it to rise, then it wouldn't, they still would have been eating matzah because they were commanded a week before that they should eat matzah when they leave. And in addition, now another question that he asks is, and this is a very interesting fact, how long did they have to eat matzah when they actually left Egypt? The answer is 1 day. Just for 1 day they had to eat matzah. Then they were instructed that they should eat for 7 days after that. For many generations later, you have to eat for 7 days. But for only 1 day is when they needed to eat matzah. So there's a general rule in the Torah. It says that when you judge a student, you can't judge the student harsher than you judge the teacher, right? The one who taught the student gets the harsher judgment. Meaning, why do we celebrate Pesach? Why do we eat matzah? Because of when we left Egypt. When we left Egypt, we only had to eat it for 1 day. So what all of a sudden did it become 7 days? So the Alter Rebbe says, so he says this is actually why in the Haggadah we say that the reason we eat matzah is because they were chased out and they didn't have time for their matzah to rise. Why? Because yes, the very first day that we eat matzah, is because to remember the Exodus and everything in the whole story, and the Paschal lamb, and then there's the mitzvah of eating the matzah. But then we eat matzah for another 7 days. Why? Because the Jewish people were chased out so quickly that while they sat down like good Jewish mothers to prepare food for the trip, you can imagine they were all prepared. They were going to make bagels and rolls and everything, and it was going to be wonderful. And they're putting it in the oven, and all of a sudden they're being chased out. And so because they were chased out and didn't have time to rise, that's why we eat matzah for 7 days, because it took a while for them to be able to adjust to the travelers and to settle and to be able to make the breads. And therefore, so for a week, we eat the matzah because they didn't actually have time. And that's the way it's actually written in Mizrahi, Parshas Re'eh. So yet, we still find that the reason that was given why we eat matzah for 7 days is Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, to remember the Exodus of Egypt. So we want to understand this whole concept. Why, when we left Egypt, did we only have to eat matzah for 1 day? Why we're commanded to eat it for 7 days? And why we say the reason is because it didn't have time to rise. So in order to understand this, the Alter Rebbe gets into a lengthy Kabbalistic discussion or Hasidic discussion on the purpose and reason for the holidays, Shabbos, and the difference and everything. And so this we'll get a little bit into it this week, and hopefully we'll conclude it next week and then be able to move on. But either way, so we have to understand this whole idea of eating matzah. What's truly this concept of eating matzah? So first we have to understand the whole concept of the holidays. What is the main ingredient of the holidays? What do we see whenever it discusses the holidays? What do we find? It says Moadim L'Simcha. It's interesting that on Shabbos we don't really find this language. On the holidays we find it all over. Moadim L'Simcha. Holidays, Moed means literally, Moed just means a set time, a time that's set aside for, so it's like an oasis of time. And so Moed is this set time. Moadim, and what is the holidays? Moadim l'simcha. It's a set time for joy, to rejoice. The main idea of the holidays is the concept of simcha, rejoicing. Like the verse says, you should rejoice in your holidays. Why is there so much joy? And here he quotes from the Arizal, from Ramesh Kardavara, where they write that the reason for the joy on the holidays is because then is the revelation of the wisdom of the mother. Okay, so in general, throughout Kabbalah, we have different Kabbalistic terms. There's the Abba, there's the Ima. There's the father and the mother. There's the giver, there's the receiver, there's the masculine and the feminine, and the descriptions in Chassidut, in Kabbalah, whenever it talks about these two things, there's the wisdom of the mother, there's the wisdom of the father. So, for example, the wisdom of Abba very often is talking about the idea of Chachma, right? What's Chachma? That's the wisdom of, it's kind of the broader idea. It's the less practical. And then there's Bina. So someone has this wonderful idea, but everybody listens and says, that's crazy. Why is it crazy? Because he has no way of explaining how he's going to fulfill or accomplish this idea. That's usually referred to as the Abba. That's the seed. Mm-hmm. But then there's the Ema. There's the mother, which the mother is the one that nurtures and the one that develops, where this seed all of a sudden develops into a full-fledged. And this is the idea of Ema, that's Bina. Bina is the understanding, when you can take this idea and actually make it more practical and bring it into reality and make it something that's... So on the holidays, it's the mochin, the ima, it's the intellect, it's the wisdom, so to say, of the mother. Dahainu, what does this mean? Mashakasa Bahal, this is why in Hallel, right? The first paragraph of Hallel that we say on every single holiday when we sing the Hallel, we say, Meshivi akeres habayis im habanim
Habanim
samecha.
Smecha. Hallelujah.
Moshivi, we return akeres habayis, the anchor of the home, im habanim samecha, the mother of the children rejoices. What's the meaning of this verse? So it's talking about that because so to say, the children are returning and the mother of the children are all coming back to the anchor of the home. They're all back home. So therefore, there is joy. So we'll explain these ideas in a little bit. Shabbos is very different. Shabbos is the wisdom or the intellect of the Father. Even though that in a way it's a greater revelation, the revelation of the Father, because we're talking about a higher level of Chachma, but the joy is not there as much. The joy is not there. Why? So here we'll explain. So to understand this, we have to understand a very basic Kabbalistic concept, which is that there are two ways that So to understand this, we have to understand a very basic Kabbalistic concept, which is that there are two ways that God is. One is when everything's in order. So one revelation of God is how God created that very first revelation, that first spark, that first godly energy, and that godly energy permutates and continues to evolve, so to say, through millions and millions of forms of evolution and contractions and whatever, in order to create each individual thing, right? So that is called, in Kabbalah, it's called the Seder HaHishtalshelus, the order of how everything, the chain, the order of the chain. The Seder, each chain, is a link that's connected to another link that's connected to another link. And all of this is what's called Ila Ila and Alo, or Ha'ara Va'ara Da'ara, or it's referred to as a array of the light. In other words, for example, you take a tree. A tree is a Ila Va'alo. What's the source of the tree? The source of the tree is a little seed, right? But where's the source of that seed? From a tree that came before it, which was sourced from another seed, which came from another tree, which came from another seed, all the way to the very first trees that were created, all the way at the beginning from God himself. And therefore, we can, so to say, that's Ila Va'alo, that's the idea of something that comes from something that comes from something else. That's typically how we're able to work in this world. Everything that we know of, everything that we can do, anything that we can manipulate, we can only do because we know the outcome of what comes when we do this and when we do that, and how all these different things, right? We can't really create something from nothing. We can't. We can cause different things. There's cause and effect. There's Ila Va'alo. There's the source, and then there's what comes from. Kamashal, and he gives an example for this, Seichel b'midas, u'midas b'machshav. So he gives, for example, the Seichel, which is the intellect, and the midas, and the attributes, or the attributes and the machshava and thought. So what he's saying is Seichel b'chinas ish hashtalshlus derech klal nikar yesh miyesh. So when a person thinks about something, right? So our actions and what we do are all based on, because there's a source to what's making us do, or whatever is telling us to do those particular things. Now, seichel and midos, seichel and the intellect and our reactions are tied one in the other. It's, so to say, a cause and effect. When I want something, it's because I understand, or I think that it's something that I want, that it's something that I would enjoy, or it's beneficial for me, or whatever it is, and therefore I want it. Now, then there is, in addition, sometimes the seichel, the intellect, and our thoughts don't go hand in hand necessarily, right? Because a person can know that it's the right thing to do, but think that I don't want to do it because of all the other, because the midos, the attributes, so to say, the body is telling him that I don't want to do it. If someone's lazy, he might know that he's supposed to be doing the right thing, and his intellect will tell him it's the right thing to do. But yet his thoughts are, I'm tired and I don't want to do it necessarily. But each one of these things, it comes in an order. So the seichel, the intellect, actually creates, so to say, certain emotions. It helps, it makes those emotions can help sometimes propel, but even that might not, because it has to go through the process of thought, which makes different things. So everything that happens within our bodies, everything that happens from intellect in order to action, for everything to do, there is a process. That process is ilah va'alol. Everything comes from something else, and this is the idea of the relationship that God has with us, in a sense of where we know what we need to do, and as we do it, we build a relationship, and God lays out for us what to do so that we can, and typically within relationships, this is the way most relationships work. There are certain days that I'm expected to do certain things. When someone asks me, when a partner asks another person to do a specific thing, so then if the person doesn't do it, there's the cause and there's the effect, and all of those different things. Of course, there is a second level in a relationship, which is what goes beyond it, and that's what allows for, so to say, redemption, or when if something does go wrong, to repair all of those things, because there is something deeper, and that's what he gets into briefly over here. V'habeiz, the second level, the way that God connects with this world, is l'mayla min hishtalshlus. This is greater than a basic, simple understanding. This would be like a miracle when God splits the Red Sea. Nothing normal, regular happened then, but he split the sea. Yesh me'ayin. There, that is or when he created the world, the very first creation.
It's
which
still
was
saying
creating
that he
something
didn't
from nothing.
split the whole sea, just like a circle, right?
There is an opinion that says that it was a circle. It was still split, but
Yeah.
it went around and not across. But either way, the yesh me'ayin mamish me'ena muchlut chulu, where God creates something absolutely from nothing. So these are two different ways that God connects with us, and in a way, these are the two different ways that we connect with God as well, right? When we sinned with the golden calf, we know that Moses went up and begged and asked that God should, and what did he say? That if you're not going to forgive them, erase me from the book. He didn't say erase me, he said erase my name. What was the idea of that? What's a name? A name is what represents, so to say, ilah va'alol, the order. Why? The name is, how are you going to be able to call me or connect with me? So therefore, I have my own distinct name, they have their own distinct name in each person, and therefore this means this and this means that. But there's something deeper than the name. I'm not really defined by my name. Who I am is an entire being, and a godly essence within me, which really supersedes that. And what Moshe was telling God is that, yes, in the regular order of things, the Torah was given, and in the Torah it's written that if you serve idolatry, this is the punishment. In the regular order of things, you're right. That's what's supposed to happen. But there's a deeper connection. God has a deeper connection than just by name with the Jewish people. There's an essential connection from the core. Erase the name. Look beyond what the outside, so to say. Go even deeper. Go to that original, the whole purpose of creation, which is way beyond all of these orders. Go over there and forgive the Jewish people. And so anyway, this is when we ask God for forgiveness, teshuvah, all of this stuff is connecting with God on a much deeper level, which is why immediately after God forgave the Jewish people, the greatest revelation that Moses ever received was given then. Because the idea of forgiveness is when you're drawing from a deeper core, right? If someone makes up with someone else, you don't want it just to go back to the way it was, because then it's never going to. You need to go, the relationship has to become stronger, has to be strengthened. So either way, but that, and how does that happen? That's because at that point you can tap into, you can reach the core, the essential, the essence of the relationship, which is much deeper. And so these are the two different ways that God reveals in this world. All right, we'll call one the miraculous way, and we'll call one the natural way. Natural way is just the way things work in this world, even though it's all really miraculous, but to us it's not, because we see it every day, every minute, and therefore we just expect the sun to rise in the morning and to set in the evening. But that is the regular ilah va'alol. Then there is the l'mayla min hishtalshlus, what's greater. So we are going to look at the ilah va'alol form, the regular, the natural way. So now there is something very unique that takes place We talk about people mention this all the time, but someone wins the lottery. What typically happens? Many of the times, a
He's
person wins the
spending it
lottery.
in less than a year.
In less than a year, they're poor and everything's gone. And what happened? What happened? This very same person, if he earns $1 million, is able to live and set aside and do everything. But what's the difference? The difference is very simple. One is beyond the understanding. One, they've earned on their own. One was just a windfall. And therefore, they don't connect with it in the same way. What's unique about the Ilah Va'ala? What's special about this order of creation? Why did God choose? Theoretically, God could have skipped this whole process and just created the world, boom. Just like that, everything in place, right? One of the, in discussions that I have with people, a lot of people that have problems with understanding the 6 days of creation and everything, one of the things that seem to help a lot of people is to think about the fact that if we believe in God, if we believe in a God, meaning that there is a power that created this world, could that power have created this world in this very minute with all our memories, with everything that's been happening before, planted that in our heads, snapped his fingers, we just landed right here. We think we've been around for 20, 30, 40, or however many years, because it's all in our memory. And right now, we were just at this moment created, and I'm thinking, and the answer obviously would be yes, if we're talking about a God that can create in such a level, if God can create the world. And therefore, if the world seems to be billions of years old, it's possible, not that it makes a difference one way or the other, that God created it only 6,000 years ago, but put in there the memories, so to say, pressed fast forward, so to say, on evolution and all that. It's possible. The point is, it doesn't
What's
make a
not
difference one way or the
possible,
other.
nobody, even him, couldn't put glasses like Gandhi on him.
So these are but God chose not to create that way, or God chose to push fast forward on some form of evolution where we see a process. What was the reason for this? And the reason that God, even in the spiritual worlds, created this whole long process was because that allows us to find our way back. If we were just created out of nothing, then what would we have
We are
to
nothing.
begin to understand? What would we have to begin to
Compared
understand
to
God?
God, we are nothing.
God forbid. God says we're everything. He created the world just for us. But but how do we find our way? What's the idea? We can work our way back. The closer the effect gets to the cause, so to say, the closer you begin to understand the more you understand yourself, the greater joy that there is. The closer you connect to your source, the greater joy there is. And when we think about it, when we are more involved in something spiritual, the joy is much deeper. Why? Because deep down, we're a spiritual being. And that's really who we are. That's our source. We may enjoy some physical activity, but the more mundane and physical it is, the further it seems to be from our very essence. But when we get involved in a spiritual pursuit, we're much more into it. Why? Because we're getting closer to the source. And as he says, that's why there's so much joy. And it's such a great joy. And he gives the parable in Kabbalah that describes that it's like a prince. Since every single person is a piece of God, we're all children of God. It's like a prince that is coming back to see his father. He was captured. The prince was captured. And so the example that's given in the Talmud is talking about in general the way the soul coming into this world, and this world is kind of like it's captive. The soul is captured in this world, and the world is overbearing, and it's getting caught up in all the mundane and everything like that. But then it remembers who he is. He's a prince. He's not going to act in this foolish, simple way. So he starts picking himself back up, and he starts connecting. And as he starts realizing who he is, and he starts living a little more like a prince, he begins to yearn to connect with the king again. He wants to go back. He wants to be back and that yearning becomes stronger and stronger. Now imagine when finally he's released from this captivity and he can embrace the king and he's back home, so to say. The joy is unbelievable. I mean, we can think about just even, with regular children and parents, the connection that a mother has with the child, even when the relationship becomes strained, there's so much pain and so much baggage. People that lose that relationship carry that with them forever. And it hurts them and it bothers them. And it's very often something that it affects them. Why? Because there's a connection between the source and what's come out of that source. And that connection is vital. And as the more we can develop that connection, the greater joy there is when something comes back to its source. So then the happier the individual becomes. And this is the idea, the reason that in the parable it talks about a prince that becomes free. Because what is the most freeing thing in this world? Right? Who is more free? The one that is, dressed the way everybody wants, the society wants them to be dressed, and goes against parents and teachers because this is the way it should be dressed, or the guy that's dressing the way that his ancestors did because this is who he is and this is how he wants to dress. A lot of people will say, oh, that guy is abused, they make him dress that way or whatever. But in reality, if he's dressing to express his identity, then whichever one is doing so, that's really the truest form of freedom. Why? Because the greatest freedom, we are most free when we're able to express ourselves. When we can break from the shackles of how everybody else wants us to identify, and instead we identify by who we truly are. When we're able to do that, that's the greatest freedom. That's breaking all the shackles. Why? Because we are turning to the source. We're connecting. We're getting closer to the seed, so to say, and therefore, when we do that, there's a tremendous joy in that form of freedom. Right? The greatest regret of a dying person, the great book that was written, The 7 Greatest Regrets, but the number one regret was that people weren't true to themselves. They didn't live true to themselves, to who they were, everything like that. They went with the flow, in different words, the same idea. Anyway, so so the same thing, it's like walking out of a dark room into the light. And that's why, what do we say when we say the blessings about the holidays? That it's like from morning, from dark morning to the light of the holiday. We talk about going from the Exodus to redemption. This is the whole idea of the holidays, the Moadim, or the Moed, the set aside time. It's a Gilui Hasimcha Shemchinas Hakeres Habayis. It's where we receive the joy, so to say, the purpose. It's kind of the sitting down and rejoicing of our identity, recognizing who we are. Nasa Ema Banim Smecha, and that's when the mother, so to say, with the children can rejoice because they're coming together, they're getting closer to their source in the form of recognizing who we are. It's the story. It's our story of who we are. It's our heritage. It's our identity. And so when we're celebrating on the holidays, Yom Tov, this Moed, these set-aside times are the days of Simcha.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, in old days, we had those infections like a few times in the history. With the Vatican, that they put fire on the Pope, and before that in Spain. And every time they were blaming the Jews for that. Do you think they'll do it again?
I'm not sure. Hold on, let's finish this and then we'll see. Let me just see here. I want to find a good place to stop.
Because it very could be. They
Right, so we'll
already
continue.
yesterday they
We'll
blocked the Israelis and the Jews of coming into Hungary.
Hold on one sec. Before we, okay, so we'll just sum up we'll stop right here with this concept because it gets into a lengthy discussion right afterwards, the whole idea of Malchut. But the important thing is to remember this idea that there's the two different forms of revelation. The Ilah va'alol, which is, like we said, compared kind of more to the person that works and builds himself a business. Think of the pride that a person has when he builds himself a business, and then he's much more careful with everything. Why? Because it's his. Compared to when he just gets that windfall,
It has no meaning.
where there is no
The
meaning.
windfall has no
Exactly.
meaning. It's
And so
stuff-
this,
yeah.
and so this is the ideas of the Yom Tov. Yom Tov is a day. Yom Tov is the holidays where we sit down and we look through our story. We recognize who we are. We come closer to our identity in that, in the understanding of the stories that we've been through, the life we've been through, and where we come from, and everything like that. That is the story of the holidays. Those are the markers along the way. And when we stop and set aside a little bit of time for that, so that's why there's so much joy in the holidays, because it's returning, it's working our way up. Again, we'll get a little more into this concept of the understanding of the mother, the understanding of the father, but we'll continue with this next week, God willing. And in a little bit, we'll go on to the Talmud class.